Okay, so we've established that it's a square root relationship. We now need to transform our data and plot a new graph, which is going to be our linearized graph. So we'll go back to Excel, and here we see our original graph. I don't actually need that anymore, so I'm going to just shrink it right down and put it to one side. Okay, so we established, in fact, I'm going to move it because that's where I want to put my data. I'll just plonk it up here somewhere. We wanted to square root the mass so that we get a straight line graph. So our first column is going to be square root mass, and that's going to be in square root kg. In fact, I'll just abbreviate it with the Excel abbreviation SQRT kg, like so. And that's going to do that, we just type equals an SQRT, and then we choose the first value. That'll give me the square root of 0.100, and then I have 6 values. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it'll square root all of the ones below that first value that I chose. In our next row, we want the uncertainty in the square, in SQRT mass. And that's in square root kg as well. That's the unit. And that's going to be equal to, so to find the uncertainty in the square root, we take the relative uncertainty of our original value, we multiply it by the index, which for the square root is a half, because square rooting is the same as raising to the power of a half. So, and then we multiply it back by this value to get the absolute uncertainty in the square root. So that looks like this, equals, and then this over this gives me the relative uncertainty in the original mass, times a half, I'll just do times 0.5 because it's clearer. That now gives me the relative uncertainty in the square root of mass, and to turn that back into an absolute uncertainty, I just multiply by this. So there's my uncertainty in the square root of mass, and I'll just auto-complete that so I don't have to go through that whole process again. And you can see that we have lots of significant figures here. I want to reduce those to 1. There we go. And then reduce these ones to 1. There we go. And then these 3 all need to be to 2 decimal places. Oops, that was too much information lost. And these ones all need to be to 3. Okay. Then we also want our period in this new transformed data table. So we're just going to copy that straight from above. And the safest way to copy is not to cut and paste or copy and paste. We just put this one is going to be equal to that one. And then we auto-complete until we have all the values, like so. And the uncertainty in T is equal to that one. And we can auto-complete that as well. There we go. And then we'll just double check the significant figures here. Oops. And fix these two because they now have an extra. Okay, so now we have our raw data, and just check that we have all the units, yes, yes, and then we can copy that into our report. So in fact, this stuff is in the wrong place. I'll just move this down to there. There we go. And then we'll highlight that and we'll add some borders. Now that we have the borders, we need to go back and now create a linearized graph out of all of this. So if we go back to here, what we want to do now is plot a graph of period against square root mass. So I'll just highlight those cells just like I did with the previous graph. Click Insert, choose Scatter, and that looks nice and linear, so we're on the right track with this. So now we're going to do all of the plotting of this graph. So the first element that we need is some labels for the axes. So the x1 now is square root mass in square root kg, and this one here is still the period in seconds, and we can call this graph, not very originally, the period versus square root of mass. And we want to add to this a trend line, and in this case we do want a linear trend line. And what we want to do is forecast this back so that it crosses the y-axis so we can see the y-intercept. And to do that, if I just choose trend line options here, you can find it on the drop-down menu here, Series 1 trend line, and then choose the little histogram looking thing, which gives us the numerical options. And we want to forecast backwards, and we want to forecast backwards from this to 0. So we want to forecast backwards by 0.316, and that should take us all the way back to the axis, which it does. And we want to include the equation. Okay, you'll notice that the equation here is stated in terms of y and x. I'm just going to change that because what I've plotted is t and square root of mass. Okay, so now that looks much nicer, and I'm just going to format that and make it blue to match my trend line because I'm going to add another line later on. So there's my equation for the trend line. And one other thing that I want to do now is just change those to be x's. So to do that, I need to go to Series 1 here, choose this paint bucket, choose marker, marker options, built-in, and X. Okay, so that's how we get our straight line graph. In the next video, I'm going to show how we deal with uncertainties in the graph.